What you're going to be seeing in this video is a demonstration of an oral reading of a conference paper. So I'm going to be modeling what you'd see if you actually went to an academic conference and you went to a session maybe on Elizabethan literature, and you would see scholars read their papers aloud. I'll tell you that I'm reading from a teleprompter, so scholars don't memorize all of their papers. They would actually be reading from a piece of paper right in front of them. And in the context of our class, this serves as an attentive listening exercise for you so that you have the chance to really practice that kind of supportive listening where you're trying to identify my key points, you're thinking about how I use my evidence, you're thinking about your own interpretation of the text, maybe thinking about some questions that you would ask after you hear the paper. And this video also serves as a model of the kind of critical analysis that I've asked you to do for the course. So you're going to hear me construct an argument. In this example, it's about Hamlet, and I'm guessing that many of you have read the play Hamlet before. Maybe you've even been to some productions or seen some film versions. And you're going to see the way that I base my claims on textual evidence. Because this is an oral reading, I have to think about how I want to signal when I'm quoting from the play, and how do I show who is saying what? When are these my own words? When are they the character's words? So pay attention to all of that. Think about how for your own critical analysis, you are starting with your quotations, with your paraphrases, with your summaries, and then you're building your argument from that evidence. So this is a critical reading of Hamlet. And I want to start with what's called an epigraph. This is a quotation that actually comes from Andrew Marvell. Then worms shall try that long preserved virginity, and your quaint honor turn to dust, and into ashes all my lust. This paper argues that the central thematic movement in William Shakespeare's tragedy Hamlet is toward sterility. Through the repeated collapse of images of fertility with images of death, Shakespeare reveals an inverted construction of sexuality in which healthy and productive procreation is absent, and the sexual act itself leads to decay rather than new life. In particular, Hamlet's own psychological struggle with the sexual activities of his mother leads him to perceive natural and revitalizing procreation, and I mean those concepts in the social world of the Elizabethans, as no longer possible within the corrupt court of Denmark, a conclusion supported by the violent deaths of all important courtly characters by the play's conclusion. Hamlet is a drama seething with corruption. Quite early in the play, the idea is established that, quote, something is rotten in the state of Denmark, an idea personified by the advent of old Hamlet's restless corpse. That's Hamlet's father. The audience soon learns that old Hamlet has been murdered by his brother, Claudius, previous to the action of Act 1, and that his son, young Hamlet, must now serve as his avenger. As this requisite vengeance does not occur until the final lines of the 5-act tragedy, the main body of the text is concerned not with the old king's murder or young Hamlet's retaliation, so much as with the corruption that emerges when natural systems of order are overthrown. Among those natural systems that have been most tainted by the, quote, most unnatural murder, end quote, that's from Act 1, of the old king, is the proper view and function of sexuality within the play's context. The Ghost describes what should be the healthy conjugal act in a natural marriage as, quote, lust that preys on garbage in the union of Gertrude and Claudius. Hamlet similarly portrays the physical relationship of his mother and uncle as occurring, quote, in the rank sweat of an enseamant bed, stewed in corruption, end quote. And he additionally calls their marriage bed a nasty sty, further compounding the feeling of decay and infestation that permeates the play. Hamlet condemns the unnaturalness of Gertrude's desire in hyperbolic terms when he tells his mother, quote, and this solidity and compound mass with heated visage as against the doom, is thought-sick at the act, thus claiming that the earth itself is revolted by her actions. And that's a lot of where kind of the assumptions around what is natural, what is the proper order comes from. It's this idea of kind of the great chain of being, the hierarchical structure in Renaissance thinking. In all of these examples, the audience is presented with an image of sex that is rotten and incapable of leading to the life-affirming sexuality that is traditionally associated with a community's general fertility and prosperity. In a Denmark ruled by a fratricide, a brother killer, sexuality is associated with death. In Act 2, this conflation of an image of sex with an image of death is seen in Hamlet's statement to Polonius. Remember, Polonius is the court advisor. He's the one who says famously, neither a borrower nor a lender be. And this is what Polonius says. For if the sun breed maggots in a dead dog, being a good kissing carrion. Oh, I beg your pardon, this is what Hamlet says, of course. So Hamlet says, for the sun breed maggots in a dead dog, being a good kissing carrion, have you a daughter? And what's happened is at this moment, Hamlet becomes kind of distracted by this image of corruption. His thoughts turn to Ophelia, who is Polonius's daughter. Although this language echoes the sense of the rotten or foul associated with the terms garbage and sty that you heard earlier, the direct image of reproduction occurring within a dead body intensifies the sense that sex is life-destroying rather than life-producing. Sex is later depicted as directly murderous during the play within the play. This is that famous mousetrap where Hamlet is trying to find a way to prove Claudius's guilt. The play queen, in imitation of Gertrude, says, "A second time I kill my husband dead, when second husband kisses me in bed." Later in the same act, Hamlet envisions using the sexual act of his mother and uncle as the moment when he can avenge his father with the assurance that Claudius will go to hell. In other words, if he's caught in the act, he will surely be damned. And this is when Hamlet turns away from killing Claudius while Claudius is praying, which Hamlet realizes is probably not a good idea, because maybe then Claudius will have received forgiveness for his sins and he won't be damned. And Hamlet says to himself, to his sword, "Up sword, and know thou a more horrid hent when he is in the incestuous pleasure of his bed." Copulation in Hamlet is not merely a natural act that has been spoiled by the corrupt state of the court, but is the occasion for death. In other words, lust itself is portrayed as an agent of mortality. In spite of the sexual anxiety experienced by Hamlet and the intense lust manifested in Gertrude and Claudius, the play's movement is so intensely directed toward sterility that it eventually becomes asexual in nature. Hamlet is a play both about non-procreative sex and unrealized sexual possibilities. It is significant to note that in the conjugal relationship of Claudius and Gertrude, it is unlikely that their lovemaking will produce a child. Gertrude already has a son over 30 years of age, right? That's Hamlet. Hamlet grounds his accusations of Gertrude's licentiousness in her age, saying, "You cannot call it love, for at your age, the heyday in the blood is tame." That's from Act 3, Scene 4. Her second marriage is not meant to enrich the kingdom with new heirs. There's no expectation that she's going to conceive a child. And the play presents the sexual activity of Gertrude and Claudius as merely exercise, merely lust. The foil for the useless sexuality of Gertrude and Claudius, again, in the perception of the social world we encounter in the play, ought to be Ophelia and Hamlet. There are no other young couples in the play. Yet Ophelia is quite early established as an almost conventual virgin, a virgin who would be committed to a convent, whose life will be one of celibacy rather than motherhood. in Hamlet's reference to Jephthah's daughter in his conversation with Polonius, this is in Act 2, the audience is introduced to the possibility that Ophelia, like Jephthah, may be a virgin sacrificed in death for her father's ambition. Once Hamlet has been forced by the ghost's command to renounce all other occupations save revenge, including his affection for Ophelia, Hamlet seems to manifest a kind of sexual jealousy of Ophelia that desires to see her sterile rather than chaste. And here's an important difference, right? Not that just she is abstaining from sex, that she's keeping her purity, but that almost that she's incapable, that she cannot reproduce. Hamlet admonishes Polonius not to let Ophelia, quote, walk in the sun, end quote, saying, quote, conception is a blessing, but as your daughter may conceive, friend, look to it. And of course, Hamlet is punning on the double meaning of conception as both understanding something, that's the blessing, or conceiving a child. Ophelia certainly has never given anyone reason to believe that she is not chaste or that she is capable of conceiving out of wedlock. And Hamlet's apprehension about her honesty, and honesty in the Elizabethan world meant both capable of telling the truth, but also sexually pure. Hamlet's worries about her honesty are without cause. However, it becomes evident as the play progresses that the reason Hamlet suspects Ophelia of falling prey to illicit sex is because Hamlet no longer believes in the possibility of licit sex. Hamlet's anguish over his mother's lust taints his mind, this is from Act 1, against all forms of sexuality. Such mental confusion is apparent in the nunnery scene in which Hamlet rails against Ophelia, and he says, I truly, for the power of beauty will sooner transform honesty from what it is to a bawd than the force of honesty can translate beauty into likeness. This was sometimes a paradox, but now the time gives it proof, end quote. That's what Hamlet says. And the word bawd means a prostitute. Later in the same scene, Hamlet commands Ophelia famously, you've probably heard this before, get thee to a nunnery. Why wouldst thou be a breeder of sins? That's Act 3, Scene 1. Breeding for Hamlet now is inescapably associated with debauchery. Ophelia is told by Hamlet, quote, be thou as chaste as ice, as pure as snow, thou shalt not escape calumny. Calumny means slander, scandal. The redeeming sexual relationship that Hamlet and Ophelia should have had, if this were a comedy, right, if this were a pastoral comedy like As You Like It, the play would have ended with Hamlet and Ophelia marrying with the expectation that they would have a happy family of children. What should have happened doesn't happen. And therefore, there exists no counterpoint to the corruption of Claudius and Gertrude. The corruption is without limit. Instead, what the audience sees is sexuality so misused and tainted that its result is sterility. Perhaps the most telling example of this movement toward sterility is the conversation between Hamlet and Ophelia during the play within the play scene. In this scene, Hamlet has asked for and received permission to lie with his head in Ophelia's lap. Hamlet, ever suspicious since the revelation of his mother's marriage, questions Ophelia's comprehension of the indelicacy of their situation. So he knows he's doing something he really shouldn't be doing. He's taking a liberty with her and making her uncomfortable. He wants to understand if she also sees that this is not proper behavior. And Hamlet asks Ophelia, do you think I meant country matters? And Ophelia says, I think nothing, my lord. She's trying to stay out of it. Hamlet says, that's a fair thought, to lie between maids' legs. Ophelia says, what is, my lord? Hamlet, nothing. And that's from Act 3, Scene 2. So Hamlet's preference here seems to be a virginity that is beyond chastity. It is barrenness. Ultimately, it is nothing that lies between Ophelia's legs. With Ophelia's virgin death dies also the one possibility for regeneration. and the play sinks further into its wasteland of sterility. What begins with Hamlet's renouncing of his own sexuality in the form of the ghost's call for action results, ultimately, in a renunciation of sexuality altogether. Hamlet's own dismissal of sexual attraction and the value of the human form is seen in a conversation that he has with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Remember, these are the two friends from university that Claudius is called to kind of scout out what's the state of Hamlet's mind. And this happens in Act 2. Reflecting on the question of, quote, what a piece of work is man, end quote, Hamlet says, and yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Man delights me not, nor woman neither, though by your smiling you seem to say so, end quote. And so we infer from this, of course, that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have been kind of smirking during Hamlet's speech. This personal dismissal of sexual attraction, that Hamlet is not delighted by man nor woman, is later made a broad proclamation by Hamlet when he cries in a moment of rage, I say we will have no more marriage. Those that are married already, all but one, shall live. The rest shall keep as they are. And of course, the one who's not going to live is Claudius. Hamlet's radical abandonment of the social institution of marriage, including the only form of sanctioned sexuality, is indicative of the bleak impossibility in the prince's mind of honorable love or beneficial sex. Rather, Hamlet perceives a society in which mass celibacy, with its inevitable accompanying extinction of the population, is the only condition which won't lead to further corruption. And indeed, that's ultimately where the play takes us, at least in terms of the social world of the royal court. Poisoned by lust and murder, Denmark's ailing monarchy is beyond rejuvenation. By play's end, the royal family and its courtiers are dead, and there are none left to reestablish the lineage. Thank you.